Blackberry-Picking by Seamus Heaney. Late August, given heavy rain and sun. For a full week the blackberries would ripen. At first just one, a glossy purple clot. Among others, red-green, hard as a knot. You ate that first one, and its flesh was sweet. Like thickened wine, summer's blood was in it, leaving stains upon the tongue and lust for picking. Then red ones inked up, and that hunger sent us out with milk cans, pea tins, jam pots, where briars scratched and wet grass bleached our boots. Round hayfields, cornfields, and potato drills, we trekked and picked until the cans were full, until the tinkling bottom had been covered with green ones, and on top big dark blobs burned like a plate of eyes. Our hands were peppered with thorn pricks, our palms sticky as bluebeards. We hoarded the fresh berries in the byre, but when the bath was filled, we found a fur, a rat-gray fungus, glutting on our cache. The juice was stinking too. Once off the bush, the fruit fermented, the sweet flesh would turn sour. I always felt like crying. It wasn't fair that all the lovely canfels smelt of rot. Each year I hoped they'd keep, knew they would not.
Hi, my name is Luke Meyer, and I will be analyzing Blackberry-Picking by Seamus Heaney using the soapstone method. The poem is divided into two stanzas, the first being much longer than the second, and it features a light rhyme scheme with lines like clot and knot. Using soapstone, we can determine the speaker to be an adult reminiscing on childhood memories with a newfound maturity. The name and gender of the speaker is never given, but it is a possibility that the poem is told from the perspective of Heaney's memories and view as a child, but is never confirmed in the poem. Next is the occasion, which in the first stanza is a group of friends in late August in a blackberry briar, picking and eating the berries. However, in the second stanza, it shifts to a barn where the speaker is storing the blackberries and watching them rot. Okay, so next is the audience, which is easy to identify, as Heaney wrote for Philip Hobsbawm at the very start of the poem, so this poem is probably directed towards Philip. Moving on, I will identify the subject before the purpose. So the subject is about a memory of the speaker of blissful childhood memories, specifically this blackberry picking with his friends. And it's important to note that even with the difficulties, such as the briars scratching them and the wet grass bleaching their boots, they still were willing to return next year, which can be seen down here. The kids ate the blackberries and they picked them and then they put them in containers to store for later. However, we can see that in stanza 2 that the storing did not last long as the speaker watches as the blackberries rot. But all the while they hope that next year will be different and that their blackberries will last longer. Alright, so next is the purpose, which I believe to be about maturing and feeling the letdown of expectations, as the speaker always hopes for a better outcome, but has begun to learn that some things never change. In this case, the blackberries always rot. The first stanza can be viewed as the speaker's blissful childhood ignorance, while the second is a sad reality and the loss of hope. The overall tone of the poem is a solemn and grim one, as it focuses on sad topics such as the speaker's loss of hope. The first stanza, however, can be seen as joyful, but is ultimately contrasted by the second stanza's realism. He creates the overall tone of this poem with the imagery of the last paragraph being almost gross in a sense, showing the decay of what was a happy memory, and this can be seen in lines such as rat-gray fungus, the juice was stinking, and the smelt of rot. The last part of soapstone is device, and Heaney uses multiple to create the overall theme and tone of this poem. First is the use of personification when describing the blackberries, giving them human-like aspects such as flesh and blood, and this can be seen in lines like purple clot, flesh was sweet, summer's blood, and the sweet flesh. Next, he uses a couple similes to describe the blackberries' feel and taste. This can be seen with hard as a knot, light, thick, and wined, like a plate of eyes. He also uses imagery throughout the first and second stanza to first describe the picking of the blackberries, but then in the second stanza to describe the rotting of the blackberries. He also uses devices such as alliteration, which can be seen with bleach our boots, big dark blobs burned, filled we found a fur, and fruit fermented. And he also uses a strange allusion to Bluebeard, who is a French folktale who murdered his wives. And finally, the entire poem is ultimately a large metaphor to reveal the theme of maturing through the story of a blackberry picking. Overall, I enjoyed this poem, and that completes my analysis of Blackberry-Picking by Seamus Haney.